Good evening. We are Paradox Media listeners. Welcome to Late Night in the Rockies. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and we are live tonight with Dan Shaw, the Vortex detective. And some people spend their life in search of the guru on the mountaintop. Dan Shaw has experienced the reverse. Teachers have come to him. At age 7, Dan began doing gazing meditations and having psychic experiences. At 14, Dan was watching the dark night sky when a UFO flashed its lights from quite nearby, below the horizon. Then in 1985, at 20 hold on one second. Oh my goodness. At 21 years old, a midnight visit from an archangel stranger eventually led Dan from the San Francisco area to Austin, Texas, where he began studying alchemy. In 1992, due to a series of divine interventions, Dan Shaw began to specialize in geomancy, a branch of alchemy focusing on the subtle energies of the earth. Dan travels extensively in the U.S. and abroad, researching sacred places with local vortex experts, and he corresponds with researchers all over the world. Dan Shaw earned a Bachelor of Science in Geography in 2001. Dan Shaw was authored a number of books on vortecies, including Vortex Field Guide, North America, Letters from the Vortex, and U.S. Vortexes 54 Miles Wide, and Stonehenge Gardening Tips Using Earth Energies in Your Garden. Dan Shaw can access the subtle energies of your land, home, and business and help to adjust the energetic field for greater harmony, health, and success. Dan is an extraordinary tour guide leading groups to exotic locations. Dan Shaw is known for his enthusiastic presentation of complex ideas in ways that are fun and easy to understand for audiences of all ages. His live public presentations encompass a wide array of scientific and paranormal subjects, exhibit a collection of inspiring, beautiful images and visionary maps, and involve audiences in engaging participatory experiences. Hey Dan, welcome to the show. So great to have you on tonight.
Thank you so much for having me on your show again.
Right, and I'm excited. It's been a while. I know you were busy working up north, showing off some vortexes there, and then traveling the world. What have you been up to?
Oh, you make it sound so exotic. Well, actually, I spend a bit of time at home in Southern Oregon and doing my research, sometimes by reaching out to people online, people by phone, and kind of talking to vortex experts where they're at. Next month, I'll be going to Alaska to do some presentations up there, vortex events, and meet the people up there who know that area so well, and put the finishing touches on a Alaska Vortex Maps book.
So you have another book coming out. That's awesome.
I'd like to do a series of books for all the states in the United States. I put together a regional book for France, and I've got one for Shasta, a little bit of information on Yosemite, so starting to come through for each state, hopefully.
And I'm sure you've investigated all of these locations, or most of them at least?
Well, it'd just be nigh on impossible to visit all these places, but given that my premise is that a vortex is in large part, let's say, perhaps not entirely, but in large part, an electromagnetic anomaly. An anomaly in the electromagnetic field. I know we talked about this the last time we talked, but just to reiterate, I have a very geophysical approach to paranormal vortexes. I think that the first place to investigate, and it's a very rich place to investigate, is electromagnetism and the human energy field and its relationship to the planetary energy field, the unity of the human aura and the planetary grid, really. and that's a very rich place to start because the Earth's electromagnetic field is highly dynamic, and nowhere is it the same. So, by my reckoning, I have a very broad definition of vortex. Essentially, every place is a vortex. So, it would be impossible for me to begin to visit all of them. Not just the Bermuda Triangle, Sedona, the things in the general collective and cultural consciousness as vortexes, but every mountaintop, every graveyard, every hospital, every military ship museum, every valley, every nuanced creek, every confluence of rivers, by my reckoning, has an electromagnetic effect on us.
So what first got you interested in vortexes and this field?
Long story how I ended up studying extraordinary healing tools and techniques, and studying with a channeled ascended master. But you heard some of it in the introduction there, actually. A midnight visit from a mysterious stranger led to a cascading series of events where I ended up in Austin, Texas, studying with a number of teachers of different healing techniques, a channeled ascended master, alchemy, and such. And that led me to be studying geomancy or earth magic, which to my mind is a subset of alchemy, the perfection of our physical body and our consciousness, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual bodies, the perfection of ourselves as the great experiment towards our physical immortality and ascension. So that begins to answer your question, I guess. So you can ask follow-up if I haven't fully answered your question there. How did you get into it? Did we cover that territory? You tell me.
As far as the paranormal, my experiences started very early in my life and have just proceeded throughout. I've seen different full-figured apparitions, goblin sort of creatures, alien orbs, which look like glass orbs with liquid fire in them. I've seen on a couple occasions. I've gotten pictures from my backyard because I've been obsessed since an early age with the sky. My mom was killed by a drunk driver when I was 5, almost 6, so I'd look up to the sky a lot and take so many different pictures. And one night the moon was just putting off this electric blue color on the clouds, and so I was taking pictures of that and discovered when tracking back in my pictures a little while later that there were little shuttlecraft in the sky, and they were in formation, so to speak, as far as whichever direction one was pointing, the other was. And they were there for hours, but that was very interesting. And then more paranormal things happening in the house, and then it's somewhat passed on to my kids as far as now they're seeing and experiencing things, and it's pretty interesting. I'm learning more and more every day.
Mm-hmm. And now you may hear my cat meowing in the background. I bribed my cat with some water from a can of tuna, but I can't be held responsible for what my cat might do.
Right.
So I apologize for that. Might have to open a window and get some outside noise. So the orbs, to me, are part of the vortex phenomena. We see those orbs at places, temples, caves, the Montana Vortex and House of Mystery, for example. So those orbs are associated in a lot of ways with, I think, Bigfoot as well. And we get so many different light phenomena photos at these places that we get sequence of orb photos that show them rotating and moving around people that manner of thing. Really detailed photos showing that they're not just specks of dust, but they're actually three-dimensional orbs that rotate as they move.
And what do you think causes them, or what do you think they are? Do you think they're alien, supernatural? I know there's different variations as far as like swamp gases, or during lightning storms. I experienced one there, but it was actually a ball of fire. It wasn't contained in like a glass-looking sort of orb.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. I believe there's probably a lot of variations in, not just variations, but actually a number of different phenomena that we want to be sure not to confuse. Excuse me. The where we have seismic or earthquake faults, we have two plates of land pressing against each other and sliding either towards each other or different directions. We end up with a lot of pressure and actually in a discontinuity in the electrical circuits underground. So follow me for a moment. This leads to orbs. So where we have these pressures, these seismic, like pressures of continental plates, massive pressures, and these minerals, often quartz crystal in the subsoil, electrical currents, and not just simple currents, but discontinuities in the currents, etc. Where there's when the plates actually slip, it does seem like there can be a massive release of energy that can cause what might be called orbs. Or certain kinds of light phenomena. I think swamp gas is a different thing again, because that's we're talking about methane there. But there's, I think, these phenomena, these electromagnetic phenomena that we see. Some people can see with the naked eye, or that we can photograph. That we're calling. There's one kind of orb, I think, which is you might attribute to these kinds of geophysical phenomena, the electricity in the ground, and at fault lines between plates and etc., slippage, release of pressure, and then also it's important to know that electrical phenomena is happening not just like in front of your face at ground level, but it's happening all the way up through the electric part of our atmosphere into the ionosphere even, and back down, because we can also look at the solar weather and solar storms and how those impact the electromagnetic environment, the electromagnetic sphere around the Earth, the ionosphere, and on down. Does that make sense? And so that would be one kind of orb, I think, or light ball phenomena. But I'm talking about a different kind of light ball phenomena, which seems to be almost like a Merkaba vehicle that these interdimensional beings or cryptic creatures are using to travel around the vortexes through the interdimensional portals. Does that accord with your understanding?
It makes sense, and one of my questions I was about to ask is, are these known to follow people? The first time we encountered one of these was in early 2012, and we're coming back from the motorcycle rally, and my daughters are seeing this light orb follow us at a distance of probably 30 or 40 feet in the...
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I pull up to the stop sign, I get out to look up and check out this ball of light, and my daughter's just begging me to get back in and go home, but I'm like, I need to see what you're talking about, and it just is sitting there watching us. I'm not sure what happened to it afterwards. We kind of hurried into the house and tucked away, but it was interesting how it followed us for at least 16 miles the whole time she's telling me about it, and they're both seeing it. So that was interesting.
And to me, that makes sense because I believe that there's a consciousness involved. There's an entity involved with these orbs, multiple entities or individual entities. So it's sensible that it's possible that it could follow you. I think part of the reason that we see these orbs or that these beings are coming through is because Earth is a fantastic gift. It's an Eden in the universe, and beings have bodies, and we're going through all these amazing experiences and emotions, and the other beings are perhaps coming here as kind of a cosmic Disneyland, so to speak, coming to observe, maybe for fun and also for science. So I'm not shocked per se that these orbs are following you, because on some level it makes sense. You're having some kind of relationship with this orb, and like I say, we see that in some degree. At vortexes, in fact, you can take pictures and not get any orbs in the photos, and then if you consciously invite in the orbs, they will come in for photos sometimes, almost as though you can call in, similar to how people can seem to be able to call in UFO sightings.
Yeah, and you hear people...
And crop circles, for that matter. I've heard numerous accounts of people having crop circles show up that seem to be responsive to their intention. I think Grunvalo maybe has a story to that effect.
Who has a story about that? I'm sorry, I couldn't understand.
There's a teacher, Grunvalo Melchizedek. I could be wrong about this, but I know there's... I'll give a better example, perhaps. I'm more sure. There's a fellow named James Gilliland who's got a ranch where there seems to be a lot of UFO sightings, and I think those folks would attest. And my own UFO story very much has to do with I was maybe not fully consciously, but very intentionally going out at night after dark, after people were in bed, turning out the lights, going out and sitting at in the dark and looking up at the night sky when I had my sighting. So again, I would think that these beings perhaps have more evolved psychic abilities than we do, and so maybe more consciously connecting to us on these what we think of as subconscious levels, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I've had people on who have had different communicable experiences like that, and they don't even have to say it out loud. They'll just say it in their head, and they'll be following the request. Can you flash this color? Can you flash this many times? It's pretty interesting.
Yep. If you make certain assumptions or conclusions, even that these beings are conscious, that they or that these orbs are conscious, or that these beings are not just technologically advanced, but also spiritually more evolved. And there's, of course, a lot of lore in the ET community about the and on the ground in the archaeological community, or perhaps the pseudo-archaeology community, about the elongated skulls and extended massive brain capacity of these beings, at least some races of aliens. Wow, what a whirlwind tour here. So I just want to mention again, I'm Dan Shaw, the Vortex Detective, and my focus is on vortexes. It's on paranormal places. So that touches on Bigfoot, it touches on orbs, it touches on all manner of things. But I'm really, my area of authority, let's say, is really on paranormal places. So I can range far and wide, but where I focus is on the direct unity between our human energy field and the planetary energy field, and how we can use that for our own healing and harmonizing the planet.
So you started off using gazing meditations. What exactly are those, and how could our listeners learn how to do such a thing?
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing when I started out. I was a child. I was about 4 years old. I had moved into a new house. I had a light fixture above my bed that was just a simple spherical light fixture hanging from the ceiling. And it had a dimmer switch on it. So somehow I had the inner knowing. I turned down the dimmer switch as far as it would go, and that left just that dim sphere was the only thing visible in the room. It didn't really illuminate the room at all. It was that dim. And I just lay under it. I lay in bed, gazed up at this dim sphere of light. Speaking of orbs, right? And that was enough, really, and to shift my consciousness. I didn't know it at the time, but now I understand better what was going on. In that there's a scientific name for it. That as you gaze at a field of light that's essentially a uniform or undifferentiated field of light, you essentially get snow blindness. There's that, as I gazed at that dim light, it would seem to disappear. And that's called the Ganzfeld effect. It's a well-known, documented effect. And as you do, you gaze into the distance, into a mirror, a pool of water, as you use your eyes differently, as you focus your eyes on your third eye in meditation, all those things affect your consciousness amazingly directly, in fact. So I just happened on this meditation technique, and every night this was before I had my UFO experience. I wasn't going out to look at the night sky at this age, but at that age, young age of something like 5, I was looking forward to the end of the day, get in bed and look up at that sphere and go into my go to sleep, gazing up at that sphere. And meditation to me has a very broad definition. People tend to think of it in kind of stereotypical terms of repeating a mantra, Om, chanting Om, or whatever it is. But I just use it very, very broadly in the sense that anything that you're doing with a single pointed focus, whether it's ironing or swimming or hiking or whatever it is for you individually that brings you to that, you could say the zone, that's meditation for you. So if people have difficulty sitting still and concentrating on a single word, well, that's no surprise. That's why we meditate, is because we're training our mind to that kind of stillness and focus. But you don't have to do a still meditation. You can do Tai Chi or walking meditation or anything else. What is it for you, do you think?
I don't really meditate.
Well, that's what people say. It's like saying, I'm not really creative, but here you have a radio show. That's super creative. Of course, you didn't say you're not creative, but, I gaze at maps for hours and hours on end, and for me, that's a profound meditation. You must have, I would hope that you have something that you do that brings you to that kind of profound sense of stillness. And if you don't, then I encourage it very highly, that you find some technique to help still your mind.
Yeah, I might unintentionally do it. Sometimes I'll just zone out and there'll be nothing, just stillness, and it might take somebody a couple times to snap me out of that, or I won't hear what they're saying, when generally I can multitask and hear many different things at once. But during those times, I think, that's kind of where you step away from everything, even your consciousness, and have a sense of peace or quiet. But I haven't intentionally done it. With our team, Four Corners Paranormal Investigations, we did some exercises as far as grounding and shielding and chakra work,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
actually helped us quite a bit. Right before we had that meeting, we had met with this lady about some negative paranormal experience she was having at the time, and it drained us all so much. And going through these exercises that Linda, our teammate, was doing with us really rejuvenated me. And it's funny because during that meeting early in the day, it caused a pain in between my shoulder blades. And as I was
Mm.
waiting for everybody to get there to the meeting, I'm laying on the bench and trying to work this knot or whatever it is out of my back. And as we did the exercises, that was relieved too. So that was very interesting. I do need to take more time to do things like that, but it's kind of hard sometimes.
Mm-hmm. You can do it anywhere if you have a practice of just focusing on your breath. You can count a certain number of inhale and then a certain number of exhale, and you can play with longer and shorter inhales and exhales, equal inhales and exhales, different inhale and exhale length. That can be very engrossing, focusing on your breath. That's a great meditation. And then as your mind wanders away to things happening around you, just keep coming back to your breath. The other thing you can do in a busy environment or somewhere outside of the cave, right, is you can do a meditation of just listening to the sounds.
And it's very important to take that time and get a lot of the things off of you that do happen to us in life. So I recommend it, although I don't intentionally do it. I just kind of zone out at times. And so that kind of works for me for now. But I have tried exercises that did work too. And it doesn't take up a lot of time. They're really quick and easy things. And whatever works best for you, try that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in terms of vortexes now, if you select a place that is near you, that is conducive, whether it's quiet or whether there's a little sound of a little flowing water or smell of flowers or whatever it is, find a place that feels good for you to connect to, and that can be very conducive to you practicing your meditation, practicing your psychic abilities. And you can do your meditation, you can do place-based meditation. You can meditate on the colors of the place, the sound of the place, the smell of the place, the feel of the place. So that would be a vortex meditation.
So with these different vortexes or vortices, do you find that people that use these after a series of time can actually pollute the vortex?
I'm like to think that the lower energy cannot enter into the higher energy. There are people who think that their crystals need cleansing, so to speak. It is, I would say, the opposite is also true, if I can say that. The places that are perhaps most powerful are ones that are least trodden by humans. There aren't too many places like that anymore, I guess. But those I would call those islands of infinity, and they're relatively uncluttered by the collective consciousness of the planet. But really, no place is separate from another. Our consciousness not separate from the collective consciousness of the planet either. So I know there are a lot of grid workers out there so-called grid workers out there cleaning up energy, and I respect that, and I'm not one of those. I don't say I'm not one of those people, because I bring a garbage bag along with me to sacred sites, and I do pick up other people's energy there on a very physical level, but I don't have, let's say, I'm not consciously a master of psychic sight, so I can't claim to be working with energy at that level. I know some people come in, they can see the energy of a graveyard or whatever it is, and they're working with the spirits and wishing them well and supporting them to move on to the next place or whatever's for their highest good or into the light or whatever it is. So to that degree, for sure, I believe in that. There's good energies and bad energies, and wow, what a hard question, Tessa. I'm all over the map on this. I've now agreed with both ends. I hope I'm making sense.
Right. Well, it's good to look at different perspectives. So what do you think causes a vortex or a portal?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that vortex is inherent in the geometry of space and time, I would say. Space and time being one thing and not two, if I can get all philosophical. But alchemy is a lot about understanding how material creation works so that we can work with material creation, physical creation. So when we understand geometry, then we can work with things that are geometric. When we understand the vortex, we can work with energies that flow in vortexes. And basically all energy flows in a vortex. Nothing's flowing in a straight line. We're on the surface of a planet that's spinning around the sun, spinning around the great central sun through the galaxy, spinning around, right? So we're actually chasing after the planet's chasing after the sun as it moves through its path. It's all spirals all the way down. So can you repeat your question? I kind of went off on a little bit of a rant there. Vortexes is just inherent in everything around us. So please, can you restate your question for me?
No worries. I was just asking what causes a vortex or portal?
Okay, so now the paranormal vortex, much narrower definition of vortex, I would say. And then even narrower would be like the interdimensional portal, right? So we've got like the general broad definition of vortex is any spinning energy. Narrow definition, like, okay, what's a paranormal vortex? And I looked first at, let's look at the electromagnetic field. I went and got a degree in geography, so maybe I could better understand the electromagnetic field. And, starting there, wow, super rich field of study because there are dozens of components that contribute to the electromagnetic field right where I'm sitting now, right where you're sitting now, listeners, wherever you're sitting. Look at the electromagnetic field in the earth, where there's moisture and minerals in the earth. There's electrical currents moving in there. If you're by the ocean, there's electrical currents in the salt water and the different layers of salt water as the currents flow with different temperatures and densities in the ocean. Above sea level, right above the sea where the air is really salty, there's a lot of electricity in the air wherever you are. Positive, negative ions, we talked about that last time. And then in the atmosphere, the electrical nature of the atmosphere. So all these electromagnetic components are continuously changing. We are moving from place to place and exposing ourselves to different electromagnetic components, and I get very excited about all this. It's interesting, but it doesn't begin to explain the mystery of paranormal vortexes. It's like a plausible contributing factor, but there's such a broad range of, first of all, electromagnetic energies, what we think of as electricity and magnetism, but also light and sound. And we're breathing it in, and we're exposing ourselves to it in so many ways. But also these finer, more subtle energies. What about acoustic energies? What about seismic energies, the actual earthquake waves that are moving through the earth? What about the solar storms? And what about the position of the moon and ocean tides and the continental tides that are daily compressing and expanding the Earth in various ways as the moon orbits around. So there's, I don't know, it's still such a mystery. I've been studying it for 20 years. But the electromagnetism, very, very rich place to focus my studies, it seems. So it's two parts. It's us, our electromagnetic field, and then the environment, the electromagnetic environment, which we're surrounded by, immersed in.
I know sometimes we get like solar flares and solar storms. Do you ever see a peak in the activity of a vortex when this happens?
I really, really think that's how it works. There's I'm looking at Alaska, and partly because, well, there's just a lot of popular interest in Alaska. There are some military planes disappearances in the so-called Alaska Triangle. A lot of disappearances, and so I'm asked from time to time, well, what about that? When that airplane disappeared, how did that? What happened then? And so I did look back at were there any unusual weather events at certain times and places around the Earth around the time of that historic airplane disappearance? Of course, that happens and that has happened in the Bermuda Triangle too. And when looking back on these events, that's you can track back a certain degree to what were the planets like, but the records of the electromagnetism is a relatively modern science, and our records of the electromagnetic field of the Earth and Sun doesn't go back that far. Doesn't really go back to the 50s. In a lot of ways, the earthquake sensing arrays that we have now and the GPS and all is relatively recent.
And there,
Another.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, don't. I'm sorry. I was just saying. Wow. These deep questions tonight. They're taking us a long ways down the road. So, yeah, I believe that these solar events, lunar cycles, and certainly the quarter days and cross quarter days on our calendar, the solstices and equinoxes and such, at those points, and there's pretty wide consensus among grid workers, dowsers, subtle energy workers that at these times that these energies or energy lines or vortexes either collapse or expand, depends on the individual researcher, but that there's some profound effect at that time.
Have you ever tried dowsing or using dowsing rods? I know there's copper wire dowsing rods, and people also using different sticks like hickory or cedar or applewood. Have you ever tried that?
Oh yeah. I'm not an expert at it. I did have the pleasure of taking a class in Scotland some years back with the president of the British Society of Dowsers. So I've taken courses, and I've actually been able to successfully teach courses in relatively short time. It's just about 90% of people are able to sense these energies. And in fact, at the Montana Vortex, we do something similar. We teach people to feel their own energies and the energies of the trees in just about 5 minutes with about an 80-90% success rate. So dowsing, whether you're using a device like a couple of bent rods, whether you're dowsing for water or maybe oil or gold or some other thing, or whether you're dowsing with a stick of some kind, fork stick, or whether you're using no device or a pendulum or deviceless dowsing, it's pretty easy to learn, pretty easy for people to learn. To some degree, I can feel these energies in my body. So I'm not that practiced with dowsing with a device. But with a device, you can get incredibly specific results with a device. You can get how the depth of your water vein, the amount of flow. Farmers are eminently practical people, so dowsing, to my mind, is pretty much dang, you deny it at your own peril. If you want water, you better call your water witch.
Yeah, my granny, when we were little, she had showed us as kids how to use an applewood stick to douse for water, and it was pretty interesting. And then I didn't really use it again until I went to Vegas and went on a paranormal tour, and they handed out dowsing rods, which you could purchase for $5 each, and it was really interesting, like you were saying, the amount of energy you feel around you and coming from you. And at a point, I felt like I was trying to support these rods, even though they're really light. They felt really heavy for a moment. And we were getting a lot of yes and no answers as we were doing paranormal dowsing. and it's pretty interesting. It was one of the very first tools that I purchased to use. Like generally I'll just use my gut instinct or whatnot, but using dowsing rods is really easy as far as communicating with the other side, for them to be able to, I don't know if they tap into your energy or they're just able to move the conductive material of the copper rods. It's pretty intriguing.
Yeah, a lot of questions remaining to be answered about dowsing, obviously, especially since people are able to douse for objects that aren't present, and for emotional issues, and for spiritual questions. And in that context, we should also mention muscle testing, which is actually, I'm going to call that a kind of dowsing. That was a technique that I learned back in '86 or '87, muscle testing, kinesiology, or you can test the body for its response to nutrients, but also allergens. And just by testing the integrity of the muscle, you resist. I pull down on an extended arm or extended elbow, and we can tell the difference between an herb that makes you strong and an herb that makes you weak, let's say. And so to me, that's very much a kind of dowsing, and I think all the same similar rules apply across dowsing, muscle testing, and such. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's very interesting, the different ways you can use your body and other apparatuses, and how long dowsing has actually been around. I know the French and Germans and others used to use dowsing a long time ago to track down fugitives and such, and it was funny to me the different things that they'd use, like a pair of scissors with a sausage on the end of it, or whatever else. It was pretty interesting to look at the different ways that they did use it, and how much success they had tracking these people down and finding different people. And after a while, I guess it was kind of outlawed because it seemed like an unfair advantage. I don't see the issue with it. I would have continued to use it if it's working, why get rid of it? But it's interesting, like, how do they even figure this stuff out? I mean, it's amazing. Maybe people were brought different messages, like others, like Tesla and others in our history that are just amazing people that have this knowledge that nobody generally obtains.
Well, yeah, it's amazing now to think, like, if you knew to look for dowsing, there'd just be like an infinite amount of information on the internet, right? I mean, but you have to we have to have the possibility, right? So levitation, right? You could do that with some intention, believing in the possibility, having the intention, and the desire, right? Those are the three motive powers in the universe in my book. And so that would be true of ascension. That would be true of, what I call the God powers. Every psychic ability, every type of psychic ability, to my mind, is it's available to us because we're divine beings. We're in kindergarten, just learning how to master the physical and how to master these abilities. But I think these are inherent in us.
So as you said, we're kind of like bouncing along the trail and hitting these different aspects of energies that are within our world, vortecies and portals and magnetic grids and such. But I kind of want to backtrack to earlier in your life. When was your first paranormal, alien, or UFO experience?
Okay. At age 7, as I say, I started doing this gazing meditation and started having a couple psychic experiences, and they stand out clear as a bell, even these almost 50 years later, and just hints of the possibility that there was something unseen, something kind of below the surface, or esoteric, you could say, the hidden, that people weren't talking about. And just like momentary flashes of maybe precognition, so knowing something that was going to happen before it happened, but not really at the time, not even knowing it was precognition until the thing happened. Just very early hints. And then at 14, as I say, I was watching the night sky rather, I don't want to say religiously, but I had a daily ritual, really, of watching the night sky. And one night, as I was watching the night sky, well, I'd just gone out to sit in the hot tub is what I was doing, sitting in the hot tub, and I'd just gotten in, essentially, a couple of minutes. It's a little hard to describe, really. This was not a saucer-shaped ship. This was an array of lights that was seemingly massive and below the horizon, and in a spot where essentially I was the only one, because I lived at the end of this narrow valley. It was in a spot where basically I would be the only one to be able to see it, and there was no sound. And these lights came on, flashed in a rather complex pattern of colors momentarily, and was gone. And I knew it was some kind of message, but I had no, and probably still have no clear, real comprehensive understanding of what that message was. It was definitely a message. I took it as a message to me that, they saw me as much as I saw them. They saw me, and not only that, but that they were, again, we had this subconscious or psychic connection where, we knew we were seeing each other, essentially. So that just brought everything into question. I didn't become a UFO fanatic at that point. I didn't tell anybody. I knew that if I opened up about my psychic abilities, that I might be dangerous for me. I was smart enough not to get myself institutionalized or medicated or anything like that by sharing that with my family. That would have been unsafe for me. But now I'm out, so to speak, about my paranormal experiences, and I talk about them freely, and it's remarkable, of course, how many other people open up to me about their psychic experiences as soon as I imagine it's kind of like being a doctor where everybody tells you about their diseases, right? The minute you introduce yourself, it's much like that for me in a way. And then the minute I say that's my thing, oh man, people's paranormal story, vortexes, people's paranormal stories just come pouring out as though they've never had a confidant before, which is often true.
Do you find that even before sharing your gifts and your experiences, people start telling you different things that they generally wouldn't tell a random person?
Not sure about that. It doesn't generally doesn't take me too long to open up the subject of vortexes. There's nothing else I'd rather talk about. It's very rich, and my gosh, I would say my paranormal experiences have been relatively rare and tame compared to the stories that come through. I have people calling me and they're like, "Do you see the energy lines?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I wish I did. Do you see them?" And they're like, "Yeah, some are blue and triangular, and others are yellow. They're seeing colors and shapes." I don't have that kind of thing. Some people have abduction stories. Lost time. They've been through a vortex and back. I'm not sure I should wish for that experience exactly, but I do in some sense feel that I kind of missed the boat when I was 14 in a way, and that given the opportunity to step on the ship next time, pretty much already predetermined that that's the choice I'm going to make. And I use that as a little bit metaphorically, whether it's a walk through a portal, get on a ship, or however it might happen, totally contrary to my imaginings. I've pretty much already committed and warned my family that I'm going through next time.
So now, after thinking about it and contemplating it over the years, you think you'd make a different decision were it to happen again?
Oh well, it wasn't like the door opened up and they invited me in, and I'm like, hey, I'm not ready. But no, I'm sure I wasn't ready at the time. But I'm not sure if I'm ready now. But I've given the possibility. I mean, I consider it a very real possibility. I've had many people tell me about their credible, in my opinion, credible people tell me about their experiences and being taken into Mount Shasta, or for however it is for people, taken aboard the ship, this, that. If I am elected, I will serve.
Nice. Well, as far as UFOs, was that your only UFO experience, or have you had others?
It was my only UFO experience, conscious, that I'm aware of. Yeah. And that would take maybe an hour show to just unwrap that one sentence, Tessa. Isn't it? Because in my experience, so many people have a momentary or brief glimpse of some kind of visionary experience or multi-dimensional experience, however you want to phrase it. And then we could spend years, decades even, maybe even lifetimes trying to integrate that brief experience, first integrate it, and then often communicate it, somehow distill it in a way that's communicable to people. I'm sure I wouldn't have been that useful. I wouldn't have been ready to talk about my UFO experience in the way that I understand it now. It really is. There's a lot of layers of meaning to it, as I remember it.
When you did have this experience, I know a lot of times things happen with telecommunication. Were you receiving or hearing or feeling anything from this UFO?
Nothing like that, but I was, in hindsight, strangely prepared to have a UFO sighting, because another person might have had a psychotic break, or might have told the wrong person and been somehow forcefully medicated or something, or flipped out. I kind of took it in stride. It was like those first few psychic experiences, kind of like, let's wait and see what this means, and see, but I didn't go off the deep end about UFOs at that point, but it did definitely undermine my faith in authority, because my authority figures were telling me, like, that stuff's not real, and I knew it was. So that all of a sudden, what else aren't they telling me, or what else are they right about? So that just opened up kind of a whole world of paranormal. And again, much like maybe a crop circle might for somebody, it's like, very non-threatening, but still, certain, maybe click some certain circuits in the brain or heart or energy field.
Yeah, that can be very frustrating. But on that note, we have to go to our first break. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. Hey guys, welcome back and thanks so much for listening to us tonight. Tonight we have Dan Shaw, the Vortex Detective. Welcome back, Dan. So great to have you tonight.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here, and I'm get all excited to talk about vortexes, and we couldn't even stop during the break.
Right? I know. There's just so much to cover, and I was saying it's kind of like a vortex of questions, but you do have a few sites that, as listeners are listening to us, they can visit and check out some of your works that you've done as far as star charts and such.
I wouldn't say star charts exactly, although that's not too far off, but at vortexmaps.com, people can see hundreds, I think it's fair to say, maybe not hundreds, close to hundreds of visionary maps of all kinds. That's a broader category, the way I use it, than vortex maps. There are many kinds of visionary maps. They're kind of maps of the dire cataclysmic future. I don't like those so much. I don't talk about those too much. But there's those kinds of prophetic maps. There's maps of where the landscape looks like faces or animals, or something like eagle and snake and Sedona, or whatever it might be. Those, I have a name for those. Those may be zoomorphic or anthropomorphic maps. Those are a kind of visionary map. And then I'm particularly interested in maps that have this geometric quality to them, because the geometry, to my mind, it's irrefutable. When you look at the Earth star globe, which is this world map that shows the planetary grid, the geometry of the dodecahedron in the Earth and the icosahedron in the Earth, and the two of those combined, and you look at how it corresponds with the deep sea trenches and the shapes of continents and this and that, the Becker-Hagen's Earth star globe, or the Earth grid model itself, it's just, to me, it's so powerful. Also, the geometry is a kind of a mandala for a gazing meditation, you could say. So the geometric maps, those are my favorite, and you'll see mostly in many geometric maps, or in other words, maps of the natural geometry of the Earth, also the geometry between ancient monuments. When you see stars, you said star charts, when you see triangles, equilateral triangles, regular triangles of various kinds, 3, 4, 5 triangles, for example, equilateral triangles, etc., what happens is that you get repeating patterns, hopefully, if you're not just making up a pattern and imposing it on the landscape. If it's not just an artifice of your imagination, if it's really there, if you see these geometries, then you'll probably see these, what I call confirmatory geometries. So if people see, I see this triangle between these mountains, I'm like, those are everywhere. But show me where you see a doubling of that, or the two triangles interpenetrating, or these, where there's these confirmatory geometries. Those are my favorite. So I've published two. One is the Becker-Hagen's Earth star globe, and you can tell by the name that it's not the Dan Shaw Earth star globe. I didn't invent it, but I published it. And that's been featured in a number of books. That's the popular kind of Earth grid one that people know. And then I've got another that shows a nearly perfect circle in 19 points around the Grand Tetons that includes Tahoe, Shasta, Sedona, 19 points forming a nearly perfect circle, every one the largest mountain or body of water in its region. And I call that Earth Star North America. So thanks for listening. Sorry to hog all the airtime there, but many kinds of visionary maps. In particular, I'm interested in the geometric ones, and people can see those at vortexmaps.com. They can contact me, and I just share as much information as I can freely there. They can get sample chapters of my books. There's a podcast channel where they've got links to hours of interviews and podcasts and lectures and such. So part of the joy of this work is talking to people, talking to you, people like you. So I hope people will reach out to me with their questions. So open the phone lines.
Well, if you guys do have any questions for...
There's a chat room, right?
Yeah, we have a couple chat rooms, one on Periscope and one on Spreaker at the moment. But if you would like to call in, you can do that as well at 970-335-9596. That's 970-335-9596 with any of your questions or comments for Dan Shaw.
Thanks for doing that. I'm excited.
So going back to your youth and your encounter with this enchanting stranger that you met that had led you to Texas, do you think this being was paranormal, alien, or human?
Yeah, I do. Not to be clever about it, but it's, I really have a hard time drawing a line between what I think of as an ascended master and my guides and angels. Like, I find it kind of comforting to think of them as my guides and angels. Like, those are the cultural constructs that, like, I feel comfortable with, but maybe they really are little green men, so to speak, or Nordics or whatever I don't really know. I might be seeing them as I feel comfortable seeing them, just through my own limited perception, if that makes sense. But I feel very, in my own worldview, this being is sometimes known by the name Saint Germain. I actually didn't know him by that name. I knew him by a different name and did not know that's who I was interacting with at the time. And that was around 1986, 1987. I had this encounter with this, as you say, enchanting stranger, and I would say that's accurate. And then I was studied with this being an so-called ascended master through a channel in Austin, Texas, as things turned out. And that was him. That was the mysterious stranger now coming through the channel under a pseudonym, not under the name Saint Germain. So I didn't know who I was dealing with exactly. It was still a mysterious stranger at the time. But afterwards, though, let me say, the man likes puzzles, if I can say that, because afterwards the pieces did come together, and to me, it's a longer story, maybe for a different night, but it's just became eminently clear that the being who's the legendary being known as the Ascended Master Saint Germain, I think I spent some time with that guy through channel, and also perhaps once or more than once in the flesh. But I have stories of people who he manifested a sparkly body from the head down to the waist in front of them in their room. They studied with him for 5 years. I mean, my story, to me, it just seems like I think other people have more amazing stories. I'm sorry. I don't know. It's odd.
Well, I love hearing all the different stories because of the different perspectives and experiences. So I definitely love to hear about that. And we do have a little less than 2 hours before our show is over. So feel free to go ahead and kind of paint a picture for us as far as the other run-ins you had with this being, if you don't mind.
Well, I'm nothing else I'd rather do than share my experience about ascension, geomancy, earth magic. For me, it's a subset of alchemy, as I said, and with the great work, the perfecting ourselves towards the ascension. I had a couple of years in Austin, Texas, where I was studying with a channeled ascended master who called himself Father Andre, because, and he was clear about this, he said that he did not want his name, essentially his real name, his notoriety, to interfere with his message. When he was asked why he wasn't using his real name. At the time, I didn't know what his real name was, right? So he didn't want his name to interfere with his message. So the message coming through this channel in Austin in 1986 and 1987 has sustained me to this day. I was young, naive, still spiritually asleep, essentially. and I had kind of a rude awakening, but the most loving awakening imaginable through this channel, and of course not just through the channel, but directly, because we all have the capability, whether we recognize it or not. We are all in direct contact with our guides and angels, the ascended council, however you want to think of it, and we're all channeling. We're channeling our music. You're channeling your questions. So I did have the grace to spend time with this channel and this ascended master, and that experience was pivotal in this kind of long series of events that led me then to study geomancy. And the way that I was introduced to these vortex maps was very much I call it the heavy hand of my angels. And the story, I could go into it. There's a lot of details to the story to get it all to kind of make sense and have its impact. And I'm working on, well, it's not just the story, of course, but the experience. I'm working on writing out the whole experience to really do it justice. It's more than a little hard to do it justice. One, in a short period of time, and two, verbally. But I love to talk about it because, of course, there were these pivotal moments in my life that gave it meaning. Let's say that. So just as you described, like how you got your start, it is. Like, I love to talk about vortexes. I don't like to talk about myself so much. It's kind of personal. I do it because, like, it's in the line of business in a way. I'd much rather kind of talk about the information of vortexes, but it is totally fascinating when you ask people, like, what's your origin story? How did you get into that? But, my origin story is kind of before vortexes. It's relevant to paranormal, but it's not that relevant to vortexes. Like my UFO experience happened to add a vortex. As far as I know, that wasn't the thing. So I came to it not because I had a vortex experience, but because one day I was in the Mount Shasta area, and I expressed the intention that I was going to go to Lake Tahoe, and the person whose house I was staying at said, well, have you ever seen this map of how Mount Shasta is connected to Lake Tahoe? And that was the beginning of a very wild, synchronous, miraculous ride to how I ended up publishing Vortex Maps. I was in tears in the throes of the days after my divorce when that happened. And I'm going to say my guides and angels handed me these visionary maps, and that has carried me these almost 30 years, 25 or so years since that heart-wrenching divorce. And the whole story does have a happy ending with regards to my divorce and my now grown children and everything. But it was like a 1-2 punch. It was like I went directly from my separation into, let's say, into the arms of my angels. It was just that fast. And they delivered up these vortex maps, and I said, I get it. There was enough in the. There was more than a 1-2 punch. This information came through in such a way that I could do nothing but bow down and surrender, and knowing that this was divinely guided, that I would publish these maps, and I've just never regretted it.
That's so amazing that you received that message and were able to take it in, especially going through a traumatic experience like that. Like, that's really a big deal for a lot of people in their lives. And for you to be able to receive that message and actually gain it is amazing. I'm so glad that came to you and that it led you on this path of being the Vortex detective, which was one of my next questions.
Yeah, I think that the Vortex Detective describes accurately what it is that I'm trying to do, in that sense that I'm helping people to find, and then to sense, and then map and measure these energetic places. So to detect, I think, really is very true. We talked about dowsing. That's very much a detection. Yeah. And there's many other ways, too. There are many ways to detect a vortex. You don't have to use dowsing. You can actually see them on a map. I'll tell you how simple. There's I've written a book. It's called U.S. Vortexes 54 Miles Wide. And now you're hearing me say this, not you, Tessa, but your listeners. You listeners hearing me say this, I want to send you a free copy of my book, U.S. Vortexes 54 Miles Wide. So if you will email me at ask@danshaw.com, I'll happily send you a free ebook to download, U.S. Vortexes 54 Miles Wide. And that'll show you that there are these vortexes around the world, and also explain why. And I'm not going to do that tonight, so there's your incentive. Around the world, there are vortexes 54 miles wide. They appear on the ground as circles 54 miles in diameter. Yeah? So you can see them on a map because the roads tend to follow the contours of the mountains and the rivers, etc. So one way you can see these is just the contours, mountains, rivers, and roads. You can see them also on an air chart, an aeronautical chart, such as pilots use, issued by the Federal Aviation Administration, will show magnetic disturbances. These have a correlation with vortexes. You can see them in the way that plants grow. Plants will grow strangely, and animals will behave strangely. So by observing the plants and animals, and just by knowing that these are things that are generated in large part, perhaps, by the electromagnetic field, and knowing the components of the electromagnetic field, as we talked about briefly earlier, or in mineral deposits underground and such, the shape of the landscape, the topography, the elevation, mountains and valleys, this kinds of thing, caves. Knowing those things, you don't have to be psychic to detect vortexes.
Well, because I think we all have our own energy fields, so we would feel that difference or a shift in the energy in the area around us. How exactly does one know that they're approaching or have found a vortex?
Well, you just nailed it. It has very much, I would say, very much to do with the shift in the energy. So as you move from one kind of energy field to another, as you move from a marsh to a deserty, dry area, there's going to be a kind of a threshold you pass through. And those are all three of them. They're vortexes, both the marsh and the deserty, dry area and the threshold. Those are all three different kinds of energy vortexes.
Well, that's very...
Yeah, I could...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't quite know what direction I'm going with that.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that these different areas are vortexes. And in the area that I live, you can drive any direction and be in the plains or in the mountains or in the mesas or the desert. There's so many different terrains in this area. And we have done World's Largest Ghost Hunt the last several years. I think we're going to skip out on it this year, but we try to get a psychic on board to help us with the investigations, as this is one of the things that they asked for during this investigation. And we couldn't get anybody to work with us because they're saying this area is just a really giant vortex, and they were afraid to do something to shift it to something more negative. So I was very surprised to get that response.
Wait, say that again? I'm not sure I understood you. Say that, would you? Repeat yourself?
For the World's Largest Ghost Hunt, one of the things that they asked for was for a psychic to be on board with your team. And I talked to several different psychics to get on board with us, and they were afraid to, because in the Four Corners area where we are, Not only are there many vortices, but they're saying that it's like one really big giant vortex, and they were afraid to do something to shift it to a more negative state, which I don't even know is possible, but I got that from several different psychics.
Okay, thank you for repeating that. Wow, that is a pretty that's an interesting result. Wow. Huh. Yeah, I tend to be very reluctant to go in and work with the energy of the place because I can't exactly see the results. I go into a place and here's what I wanted to kind of conclude the last thing with is, as we can sense these energies, as we become aware of the possibility, I think we get more and more sensitive. That's been my experience. But if you're aware of the possibility, as you move from place to place, you begin to maybe feel a tingling in a certain part of your body. The hands can be very sensitive. Might be able to feel it in your hands. It might be the hair standing up on your arms. I tend to feel a tingling in my face and my third eye. People have these experiences where they feel the energy shift from place to place. They don't necessarily attribute it to the electromagnetic field or to paranormal vortex or to the unity of their aura with the electromagnetic field in which they are immersed. So that's how I wanted to kind of wrap that last segment there.
So another question I had for you regarding your history, what exactly is geomancy and alchemy for those of our listeners out there that don't know?
Thanks. Geomancy literally means earth magic. There's other kinds of cartomancy. Cartomancy is the magic of playing cards or tarot cards. Geo meaning earth. Geomancy is earth magic. And what I'm perhaps most interested in is the science behind earth magic. The merging. There's I think in alchemy we're merging all polarities. It's the yin and yang. Yes, we're merging life and death to achieve immortality. We're merging the polarities to experience the ultimate unity, the extension, the expanding out into one and merging with everything. So, what I want to say is all the principles of geomancy apply to alchemy. All the principles of alchemy apply to geomancy. So there's this yin-yang principle that happens in alchemy, or I should say that happens in the universe, and that we hold this principle in alchemy of this unity of dualities, let's say. And then that also applies in geomancy. So geomancy, we'll call it earth magic. It's actually a practical alchemy of working with the earth energies and the energies of your body towards your spiritual and physical perfection. Same as alchemy. So geomancy, earth magic, a subset of the great work of alchemy, where if you're an alchemist or a student of alchemy, you might be working with a furnace and metals to better understand how things are put together, or you might be working with water. I know a number of water alchemists, or you might be working with sound or color. Different alchemists. I use the term very broadly. The highest respect to people who are working with acoustics, whether they're working with, acoustics or lasers, whether they're working in, optics or in metallurgy. These people who work with ink and paper. People who work with dyes. These are all a kind of alchemy, understanding how the material world is put together so that we can better master it. Now, if we bring to it, this spiritual understanding that where the work is happening inside of ourselves, then the actual outer work of making the dyes, making the stained glass, building the cathedrals, then it can really become this full expression of alchemy inside and out.
It's very interesting, and this is one thing that you can study forever, and it has been around for, it seems like the dawn of time. How long exactly has alchemy and geomancy been prevalent?
Well, it's an infinite thing, isn't it? I mean, we're all conscious divine gods. We are gods who I think, we're one unified conscious being who wanted to have more experience, and so fragmented, such that we're each a spark of the divine fire, or the divine sun, you could say, perhaps more poetically, so that the experience is one of, let's say, an outward breath and an inward breath. We have the materializing impulse where spirit is coming down into matter, and we have the spiritualizing impulse. So it's that, you could say it's like the seal of Solomon or the six-pointed or Jewish star, and that we have this upward aspiring triangle and this downward aspiring, you could say it's a downward aspiring triangle, yes, because it's the spirit and matter coming together, like the lightning coming both from the sky and from the ground and coming together. So from the moment that God created the heavens and earth, there was that creating of the duality, and then he created the male and female duality. Obviously, he's the wrong word there, but the Godhead, let's say, created this gender duality essentially in all things. So again, there's a gender duality in alchemy, that yin yang represents also a kind of a gendered male female kind of a relationship. So, but again, one of unity in duality or multiplicity. So I guess the short answer to the question is forever. Alchemy's just been forever, from the out-breath of the Godhead into all this, the infinite sparks of every piece of conscious creation.
And I like what you're saying about the whole duality and yin-yang and so on and so forth. And there's even a scripture that often comes to mind, he, them, they, us, as far as their creation. And I think there was a God, but there's also the wife of God, which he never spoke of because, look at how everybody uses his name in vain. He wouldn't want that for his partner, so he just basically left her out of it. But it makes sense as far as there are male, female, and other differentiations of us, and it's interesting to think of how it all started. And I think that's what a lot of us think about in our earlier years, like, how did this all start? Why am I here? What is my purpose? So on and so forth. And the fragmentation portion of it makes me think of how, they're trying to see themselves and their different faults, as they could be thinking, they're perfect, but they put their different personalities and such out there, different pieces as far as you and me and everyone else. That way they could kind of look into the mirror of themselves. They could watch us and see what exactly makes them tick, as what makes us tick, and it helps them to find out different perspectives of their personality or their own creation, because everybody wants to know where they came from and how this all started, and what we're meant to be, and will we be able to fulfill that potential. So that's a pretty interesting look out on it. I love different perspectives and different ideals, and I think sharing that with each other helps us all grow a little bit more.
That was just perfectly said. Perfectly said. And it's I tend to get caught up in the information. I'm kind of a very mental guy. I get really excited about electromagnetic fields and that kind of thing. But it's important to me, and just to bring it back to kind of ground the this information in the experience of going to a place, perhaps preparing to go to the place, a place of pilgrimage, arriving, recognizing, honoring the threshold, maybe taking off your shoes, perhaps bringing a gift to the place, such as a piece of fruit, some nuts, rice, something like that, that's not going to be then out of place. And perhaps making some sounds, chanting, singing, whatever that might be, listening to the place, maybe drinking some of the water if that's appropriate, eating a little bit of the wild edibles, really connecting with the place, breathing in the smells of the place, taking in the colors, all these things as ways of connecting to the place, and then withdrawing your energy when you're done, bringing a trash bag in case there's any trash along the way, really caring for the place. These are, to me, one of the, along with gardening, that is the end of our journey. That's the end of this informational journey about vortexes, is actually connecting with our place and experiencing this unity, not just with our immediate surroundings, but the actual epiphany, that awakening of unity consciousness, which I can point the way. I'm not there yet. I've had glimpses. I can guide, but I can't claim to master.
It's awesome to be able to help people in that way of guiding them. Because a lot of times, even with children, when you're guiding them, sometimes they'll come up with something that you never thought of. And that's another thing that you can add to your repertoire of information, and you can add that perhaps next time you go out to do this. It's very interesting, and working with the land, for me, is very therapeutic. When I lost my niece, she was murdered, and I just went out and started digging and planting and weeding, and it was like months and months on my hands and knees, working in the earth, but it was really good for me. It was really what I needed to do to connect back with the planet and with the energies coming from there, and even sometimes barefoot. And I know that's a really good way to ground yourself and reconnect with the planet and the earth around us and all the energies. And when you do this gardening with the potential of vortex and such, do you ever do it barefoot?
Oh, exactly right. I mean, if your hands are in the dirt, who needs to be barefoot, right? But you're down on your knees, you're watering, your electrical system is connected. Hopefully, you're touching the plants, right? I had a therapist at one time who was doing cranial adjustments. In other words, adjusting like a chiropractor might adjust your spine, cranial adjustments to your head, right? So I asked the fellow, have you ever met anybody who didn't need a cranial adjustment? And he said, oh yeah, your friend Neil, the arborist. He spends all his time in the trees, and it seems like that keeps him adjusted.
That's awesome. And I'm sorry I got distracted. We do have a listener who has a question. Sharon is asking, so filling a vortex is like getting an attunement or healing from a Reiki master into your hands or body, right?
Oh gosh, I'd say exactly. It's the perfect analogy. I think of our human energy field as having chakras, which are like vortexes, and having acupuncture points and meridians. And those meridians are like ley lines. And I'm not quite sure where that analogy falls short. It seems to me just a wonderful analogy. I'm familiar with Reiki energy. Sending Reiki energy to all of our listeners right now. And sending you my love. Thanks for listening. Thanks for asking the question. And the perhaps foundational principle of alchemy is that all is one, that there is no separation. There's no separation between you and me. There's no separation between you and your place. After all, you are breathing the air in and exhaling, and you're rubbing off on your place, and you're excreting, spitting, peeing, body fluids, that kind of thing. You're leaving parts of yourself behind. There, you're eating the food. There's in truth, there really is no separation, and that's that's one of the goals along the path to ascension, is that unity consciousness. And then, to me, ascension is that physical ascension of actually the matter of the body expanding out into everything and becoming light. Light, we're living light, experiencing the illusion of being trapped in matter. So this Reiki energy, Chi energy, Vortex energy, Orgone energy, to me it's all the same phenomena exactly. And we're not in like a handshake relationship with the earth, but we go into the vortex, we feel the energy affect us, and also we act as, you could say, as acupuncture needles, perhaps especially when barefoot, and that we have this relationship with the place. It's also affected by us. It's not a relationship at a distance. It's a unity. So yes, exactly like Reiki energy. It's great to have 3 hours, I must say. I really appreciate it. It does give me a chance to go on.
Yeah, I really like it too, because even at 3 hours, a lot of times I'm like, it's still not enough time. I need more time, because there's so much to cover. But I do appreciate having this lengthy amount of time from you, because I love your perspective and picking your brain on certain things, and hearing your answers. They're quite unique and amazing and very intelligent.
Well, thank you. I'd like to think I've stood on the shoulders of giants.
So one of the questions that I had is, how do you tell the difference between a vortex and a portal?
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, I have a broad definition of vortex and a narrow definition of vortex. And I don't think necessarily, I think all portals are vortexes, but not all vortexes are portals, as somebody said it so aptly to me the other day. I agree in that if you can imagine, let's start in just on a flat sheet of paper, like on the surface of the earth, that a vortex is a spinning thing that looks effectively like a circle. Okay, so we're just going to start with the simplest cartoon of a vortex. You're standing here, it's a 54-foot circle, diameter circle, let's say, on the ground. Essentially two-dimensional. If you draw a line on a paper, it's like practically one-dimensional. But okay, so what's that? That's like a cross-section, like if you cut an apple in half. It's a cross-section of more of a spherical form, let's say, probably mostly underground, looking almost like a jawbreaker, like with several different layers, right? So you're standing on the surface, and you're seeing or sensing or dowsing, mapping, let's say a circle, and it's probably spinning. It's probably expanding and contracting. It's probably absorbing energy and re-radiating energy, maybe in cycles of like charging and discharging, right? So maybe it's affected by other vortexes around it. Maybe it doesn't occur singly. Maybe it's in a cluster of vortexes. Well, how are these other vortexes rotating relative to that first one, right? So now are they like gears in a clock where they're counter-rotating so that the gears intermesh? Or are they possibly both rotating the same way so that where they come together, now you've got this intense kind of shear force happening? If you can imagine driving through a car wash and there's these big brushes and they're kind of both spinning the same way as your car goes through. On either side of the car, you got these big brushes. Well, possibly, just saying possibly, this interdimensional portal phenomena happens only under certain circumstances where there are certain patterns of vortexes that are behaving a certain way. And here I have I'm going out on a hypothesis here, but I'm going to suggest that where you have fields of granite boulders, you have a very, very rich magnetic field there on the surface. Because these boulders, if you think about their history, and to me this is so romantic. If you think about the millions of years of history for these boulders, these granite boulders, likely they've got some quartz crystals in them, and they've been transported some great distance by glaciers. So as they've tumbled and they've been transported, whatever original configuration that these, and especially if there are magnetic minerals in these rocks, there's going to be like an initial configuration, and then as they tumble and they end up in this boulder field, they're going to be in a different and very complex configuration. So looking for vortexes, you might go wandering around a boulder field, but in that case, bring a GPS locator, a friend, unroll a thread as you go, take every precaution. Some people apparently do not come back.
Yeah, and that's when it gets creepy. It's like, where did they go? Did they step into another dimension? Which makes me laugh because my 4-year-old came in earlier and her sister had given her a heart with a key attached to it, and she came in and she said, "Mom, I have a key to another dimension." And she was saying how it was one that she had built on her own, and how it's easy to get in but hard to get out, and it just amazes me, some of the things that she says to me. I'm like, do I need to check for pods? What is my 4-year-old talking about? Wow, like some of the things she says just really blows my mind. But one of the questions I was going to ask you is, can a vortex or portal be a free-floating thing, or are they always in a fixed place? And like you were explaining with these glacier shifts, how the different granite and quartz and such can, roll a distance and have a different configuration. So it is possible for these things to move. Does it happen due to landmass and boulders and such moving, or can it move due to other circumstances?
I think I've never answered quite that question before. There's a lot of layers to that, so you might have to bring me back around to this a couple times. So here's what I think. I think the electromagnetic field is highly dynamic. That's how I experience it even. We have these, as we say, solar storms. We are moving our own electromagnetic field from place to place. There's localized perturbations, variations that we don't, could hardly even begin to cover in 3 hours. Let's look at this. Let's say there's an ore deposit underground, and you've got, because of this ore deposit, you've actually got more mass, so there's actually more gravity over here underground. Then we walk over here, there's not ore underground, so there's less gravity, right? So now we've got variations in the gravity field. Does this contribute? This is totally beyond electromagnetic now. We're talking gravity. Here's a gravity map, and it shows that over here, high gravity, over here, not so high. And it looks like any other map where they show colors or they show lines, ISO lines on the map to show gradations. I mean, it looks like any other map. Not only is there a difference in gravity intensity here and there, there's also different slopes of gravity between here and there. Between here and there, there's a very high slope of gravity, let's say. So now, there's a lot of potential contributors to vortexes. So now, are they moving? Well, sure. They're charging and discharging. They're expanding and contracting. They're being influenced by us coming in and out. And are they 100% natural? Or is there some component of our human intention and will and magic? And I'd say, yes, there's definitely a component of human consciousness. So we might contribute to the strength of a vortex, or we might weaken a vortex, or as you say, we might muddy a vortex, or clean it up, or move it around, even flip it over, even. And again, some people are gifting vortexes or sacred places with crystals or other devices, let's say. And I suggested maybe gifting a place with a piece of fruit or nut or some rice and honey or milk or something like that, right? Because that would not be out of place, I would say. But consider that if you take an energetic object like a quartz crystal, and quartz crystals are piezoelectric. They're so well organized that when you apply pressure, they give off an electrical charge. They're piezoelectric, quartz crystal is. So when you take an energetic object like a quartz crystal into a vortex, you are affecting the energy very definitely. And you may not be aware of how you're affecting the energy in that place necessarily. Maybe you do have psychic sight and you have, maybe you're omniscient. I don't know because I'm not omniscient. But when you bring a crystal into a place, it may not act as you think it's acting. It can act, quartz crystal can act as an interrupter of electrical circuits. And I have experienced where people brought crystals into a vortex, interrupted the energy. And the energy at a vortex can be very turbulent in the first place. And it's kind of working out its own issues in a certain sense. And I wouldn't want to, well, let's say there's enough muddiness in the collective consciousness and on the planet. I don't want to contribute to that. So it's the same even with my maps. I don't want to put a map out into the collective consciousness that is, let's say, just an artifice. I would like to put out maps that actually reflect the natural geometry of the planet. Because I just don't, I don't want to just lay more thought forms on top of the planet. It's already, oh my gosh, there's no end to the geometric maps already here in the landscape. Let me say that, to quote Shakespeare, more things on heaven and earth than are dreamt of in the minds of men. If you begin to study these visionary maps or even just geometric maps as a subset, endless rabbit hole. There's innumerable visionary maps, so it's just endless fun, to my mind. Anything that I don't fully understand, great mysterious adventure.
Indeed. And on that note, we do have to go to our second break. So you guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. Hey guys, welcome back and thanks so much for listening in tonight. Tonight we have Dan Shaw, the Vortex Detective. Hey Dan, welcome back and thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for giving me this time to share.
It's so awesome to have you back and hear about your different journeys. Like you were saying, you get to go to Alaska, hopefully to Homer. Are there different vortices or vortexes that you want to check out while you're up there?
Yeah, let's talk about Alaska vortexes. Again, to recap, my primary interest in these energetic places is in how they affect our human energy system. So I'm looking firstly at electromagnetism. And so if you consider that a vortex is an anomaly in the electromagnetic field, or a place where the electromagnetic field is different from the surrounding electromagnetic field, and that's like practically everywhere. And then when you get to a place like Alaska, well, there's just dozens of contributors to the electromagnetic field, and of course, compared to Iowa, you got a lot more going on in Alaska because you got those changes in elevation, and just in a space of 6 feet, a couple meters, like between your toes and your head, there's a pretty large electrical differential between those two elevations. And so this is part of the reason why we keep talking about going barefoot, making yourself a part of the earth, because there's this electrical potential with elevation, which is why you don't want to be on a mountaintop during an electrical storm. So just on the surface, changes in elevation. And then we talked about below the surface, where you've got ore and mineral deposits, you've got moisture, so you've got electrical currents of various kinds doing various things, sometimes being interrupted by faults. You've got the crystals, quartz, silica is the most, I think, one of the most abundant, I don't want to say the most, one of the most abundant minerals on the planet, silica. Where it crystallizes, now you've got this electrical material that is under pressure. Of course it's under pressure, it's underground, right? So the electrical current's underground for a number of reasons. And so now we're talking about Alaska. Ore and mineral deposits? Are you kidding me? We got all kinds of, got the oil at the world grid points. We've got gold everywhere. You've got gold in the quartz crystal where it's still in rock form and then it erodes and washes out. Then you've got placer gold in the rivers, and then the rivers fill in as they meander and they fill in, create oxbows and this and that. The river fills in, changes course over time. Then you've got gold underground, maybe placer gold underground. Maybe you're living above an old riverbed, wherever you are. Rivers meander, people build close to the rivers. What's underneath where you're living now? Is it maybe some old riverbed? So again, here we are in Alaska. Now we've got geometries of points. We've got, let's think of a vortex as a broadcasting kind of sound, some kind of electromagnetic frequency. Think of it as sound because a bell is a very wonderful acoustic analogy. So if you have one bell, the sound radiates out essentially in a sphere. We don't really think of it that way. In our own experience, we think of it like sound is coming from there to us. But of course, it's radiating out essentially in a sphere if it were unconstrained or uninterrupted. Right? So if you have two bells going off, now what's the distance? If they're going off at the same time, where are you in relationship to these bells? These bells are setting up a kind of a resonance between themselves. Let's say they're the same bell. Essentially, they're the same frequency, right? That's good. Okay. So now what if you put a third bell in, and that bell is like at a point that's like an equilateral triangle from those first two. And now you're ringing that same frequency bell together, 3 bells, ding, ding, ding. Now it's setting up like 3 mountains, perhaps, setting up a very stable kind of a waveform because it's self-reinforcing. It's not just a line in 2 dimensions. It's actually like a stable waveform. Yeah. So in Alaska, what have we got? We've got those geometries as well. Triangles, sure. But look at the Great Pyramid. Where's that located? In relationship to Alaska? Well, I'll tell you. in relationship to Alaska, the Great Pyramid is in the position of a square. Now, just like in astrology, right? This time we're inscribing a square inside of the Earth, and one points at the Great Pyramid. It's about 30 degrees, a little more, about 30 degrees, the Nile Delta, right? Egypt, 30 degrees north latitude. Where's Alaska? Well, it's on the other side of the Earth. If you draw a line over the North Pole, it's at about 60 degrees, right? 30, 60, that's add up to essentially a square, 1/4 of a 360-degree circle. So what are you saying, Dan? Are you saying that the point in Alaska has this relationship to the Great Pyramid? So what? That's just random. You could say that about any 2 points that have this square relationship. Well, that's true, he argued with himself, rhetorically. But in fact, when we look even more closely, thanks to the work of Jim Allison with 1L, what we find is, or at least in part to Jim Allison, I want to give him most credit. What we find is that it's actually the other way around. It seems that the point in Alaska, there's a point in Alaska which seems to be an ancient North Pole, and that the Great Pyramid at that square position, 90 degrees from Alaska, it seems to be one of a huge number of ancient monuments around essentially a great circle around the Earth, an ancient equator. And I have at hand that list of points that shares that geometric relationship to the Great Pyramid and to Alaska. So, as a North Pole does to an equator. So, I'm happy to maybe name a few more of those points for you. But I would again direct listeners to vortexmaps.com. This stuff is all highly visual, and it's really hard to describe. And well, I got a pretty huge stack of maps here to go through, but give me a minute here. I think I got my Alaska book here in blue. Yeah. So if you take a look at your globe and you put this point, 59 degrees, 42 minutes north, 139 degrees, 17 minutes. Sorry. Now what do we got? West or east? I forget. I think it's west. 139, it's got to be west, right? You get Giza, Siwa, Paratoari, which I haven't heard of even. Got to look that up. Ollantaytambo, Machu Picchu, Nazca Lines, Easter Island, all very familiar. We got a number of points in Southeast Asia you might not recognize. Anaitium, and I might not pronounce them right, of course. Priya Vahir, Sukhothai, Piai, Mohenjo-Daro, Persepolis, and Petra, all forming that equator around that point in Alaska. So that is one geometry that we find in Alaska. And I'll go into that next month. About a month from now, I'll be in Anchorage for a series of events, and then hopefully Homer after that, and Seattle on my way there. So if you are in any of those areas, or any other area for that matter, some little town, it doesn't matter. If you'd like me to come visit and do some Vortex events, please reach out through danshaw.com or ask@danshaw.com. And hope you don't mind my addressing your listeners there directly like that.
Oh, no worries. It's all about the listeners, and I want them to look into things and make their own decisions and discernments and such. So I really appreciate you sharing that with them. And I'm like, hey, I'd love you to come down here to the Four Corners area and Mesa Verde and so many different land formations and such where there is so much energy, and there's just a plethora of activity in this area. So,
Right, right. You
for
tell me, you did you. Sorry, geez, I'm interrupting you again, but you live in a very geologically interesting area. As I recall, you described in one of our previous shows. You're in some kind of a little valley that has some very interesting. Is that true?
I'm actually originally from Arkansas. I've lived in Miami, Florida, Marysville, Washington, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee. But out of all the places I've lived, I feel most comfortable here in the Four Corners area of the United States. And like I was saying before, you can drive 30 minutes or less in any direction, and you're in the plains, or you're in the mountains, or the plateaus and mesas, or the desert. There's so many different
Vortexes.
areas and vortexes, and it's just amazing. And I don't know, I've heard people say with all that combined it makes one really big paranormal vortex, but I know I've witnessed the paranormal as well as UFOs and alien activity and skinwalkers and so many different things in this area. It's just mind-blowing. And so for someone like you who has done so many years of study to have in this area would be amazing. And I just want to meet you anyways. I've known you for maybe about a year now, and I'm just always amazed at all the things that you're doing and the different tours you're giving and just all of the intelligence and time you've put into all of these things, including geomancy and alchemy and everything else that goes along with it. There's so many unanswered questions out there, and I love learning from other people. It's just amazing, and for me, easiest. Like, I can read something and retain it, but to learn hands-on or through my own experiences is basically best for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for my part, like I love the questions as much or more than the answers. Like I say, if I fully understood it, I'd move along. I'd do something else. I don't know, photography. Just to draw something out of a hat. But it's the thing is, it is fascinating, and that I'm fastened. I'm committed. It's this. It's like the rabbit hole keeps going deeper. The more you knock, the more the door is opened. Let's say, it touches in on, as far as I can figure. And this is really a question for the listeners. Please, if you could tell me, what is the overlap, if you have an opinion, between place and the paranormal? Because, obviously it seems the paranormal can happen anywhere. Paranormal can happen anywhere. But some places, they've got more of this. Maybe it's residual thought form. I don't want to put words in your mouth or answer my own question or anything, but what is the overlap between place and the paranormal? Of course, paranormal, I love it. It's so broad. I could study forever. Of course, I love every part is meaty and full of mystery. I just don't have all the answers, but what is the place? What is the place element to the paranormal? That's where I want to just keep digging.
So you're wondering more about the paranormal and where these different vortices or vortexes are. And one thing that interested me and I was unaware of at the time, because I'm just constantly expanding and learning new things, but the Travel Channel had contacted us because we do have a paranormal team called Four Corners Paranormal Investigations, and we've done many investigations and experienced so many things, and they're wanting to do, with the team Ghost Adventures, a new offshoot of that distinctly on the 37th parallel, and I guess we're right there. And we've had so many different things happen as far as paranormal, and like I said, skinwalkers, UFOs, aliens, so many different things, like lights, orbs of different colored lights flying around, and And so it's like hard to pin it down to just one thing, especially when they're like, well, we especially want to focus on where any deaths or suicides have happened. Right?
Yes, yes. Well, I love our friends, the television producers and everything. They definitely know what they want. And, I hear from producers who want to know about the disappearance of this military aircraft, about which, sure, I have an opinion, but no direct experience. But man, your experience in the paranormal is so broad and so much deeper than mine. I guess I could have gone down that path instead of having such a, because I think I have a kind of pretty much a laser focus on Vortex maps in a certain sense.
Well, I mean, it's
As
always
opposed
good
to a
to,
paranormal researcher.
yeah, it's always good to, like, lash out in different directions and learn different things and put that all into one accumulation of information. And, it's just more and more and more, and there's so much to learn, and there's really no expert in any one of these certain fields. We're all just learning as we go and learning different things. So that was a really good question, I think. And Sharon in the chat room was asking, are vortexes more powerful when it's surrounded by water? Could the magnetic field be heightened when water is present at the vortex?
Mm-hmm. So often we find an association of water with vortexes, vortexes and water, hand in hand. And every kind of water and ancient monuments that work to energize water, to collect it, store it, transport it, and so much effort gone into these monuments, into water engineering, and the pyramid right by the ancient Nile, and all kinds of chambers beneath it, and channels, water channels, in that immense platform beneath the Great Pyramid. There's as much more engineering and material went into the platform that pyramid was built on. It was not built on sand. You can't build a pyramid on sand, so there's a substructure there. And everywhere where there's water, you've got some vortex phenomena going on. If you ask me, in the broadest electromagnetic sense of vortexes that I'm suggesting here in my kind of very geographic reductionist way, which I recognize and I'm qualifying. Yes, it's everything to do with electromagnetism around water, whether it's, let's say there's chalk in the cliffs of Dover. There's a good place. Or underneath Stonehenge, or where you have those chalk figures carved into the landscape in England, or where all those crop circles are showing up. You got all that chalk under there. It's what is it? It's the shells of these minute ancient sea creatures, right? Well, that's got some pretty peculiar electromagnetic properties when rainwater percolates through. So there again, you've got water going on. Seawater, electrical currents, and the different temperatures and salinities of seawater all going at cross directions. If you were to insert a core and pull out a core column of seawater like they do glaciers, right? You'd see all these different layers of temperature and salinity in the seawater. Each one of those would represent a current, not just of water, but also electrical conductivity and electrons creating magnetic fields. And then you've got springs and healing springs and hot springs and waterfalls, and all of these contribute to the electromagnetic field in some ways. Waterfalls, we've got the negative ions that are so beneficial to our human energy system. So right on, yes, everything to do with water. If I have a room of X number of people, 30 people, and I ask them what is to think of their favorite place, generally 3/4 of them will say something having to do with around water. And then a lot of people will say something about mountains, and then a number of people will surprise us and say some third thing. But water, magical, absolutely magical.
So when you're talking about chalk, are you talking about chalk or limestone? which stones actually have magnetic currents. And I know I used to think the coral castle was made out of coral, and then I learned it was actually limestone during I think it was on the History Channel. And I wanted to look that up because I'm not sure if that's true or if they just said that. But it seems like limestone, there's different things about it that make it special, and a lot of people use it. I don't know if it's due to its longevity or what, but it makes you wonder, like, what are these different structures made out of? I know the Coral Castle supposedly is made out of limestone. What are the pyramids made out of, and all these other structures that are known as sort of energy conductors or gatherers?
Ah, brilliant. Oh, you asked such good questions. So chalk, as we think of it, like, yeah, this is stuff we're writing on a chalkboard with. Yep, that's shells of ancient sea creatures. It's been processed in some way to give you a chalk stick, but the great white cliffs of Dover on the English Channel, etc., massive amount of chalk deposits that were once the ancient seafloor that's been essentially pushed up through tectonic processes, geologic processes. And I'm not a geologist, but fascinated, again, interested in studying the electrical and energetic properties of minerals, not just quartz, but I think of limestone as being a relatively unenergetic material. But I recently read something, now that you ask, I'm going to have to run this one down, about the energetic and subtle energetic properties of limestone. Okay, limestone's kind of it's a different thing from chalk, but it is very soft. It is in massive quantities in that area of Florida, and that is what Coral Castle's built of, despite the romantic name, which is, it's all right in the vicinity of the Earth grid point, which is the Bermuda Triangle. It's all right there. Florida is, and there's a lot of lines emanating out of the Bermuda Triangle that cross those areas where Coral Castle's built. The other monuments, you look at any other monument up and down the road, what you find is that they're all built out in energetic materials that have been transported long distances and layered in often peculiar ways to create essentially energetic devices. If we are creating a modern electronic device, such as a transistor or any of these other things, a large part of that magic of modern electrical engineering has to do with layering these materials having different properties. That was all done in the Great Pyramid. It was done in these ancient burial mounds where there'd be layers of sod, then layers of rock, then layers of something else. Very much like an orgone energy device is constructed. So the layering of those energetic materials is apparently very important. And essentially in all of these ancient monuments you'll find, and in natural vortexes, of course, also too, you'll find the quartz crystal, veins of quartz crystal showing on the surface, and the ancient stones chosen with, because they have quartz crystal in them, or the marble and the Great Pyramid, and compared to the other property of materials in there. So the energetic nature of the building materials is very important, clearly. Lots to study.
Indeed. Like somebody said on Periscope, the never-ending story, it just goes forever. And will we ever attain all of this knowledge that's been out there for centuries? So another person had a question. Does a vortex, or can a vortex, aid in physical and spiritual healing?
That is, I think, this sums up my entire thesis right there. So we are electromagnetic beings. Every cell, I'm not saying this as an analogy, every cell is electric and magnetic, and it is subject to and responds to and affected by every minute variation in the electromagnetic field. There's certainly birds and bees and fish that can all sense the electromagnetic field. They do so by having minute receptors for electromagnetism, sometimes in their eyes. Often that receptor is minute amounts of magnetite. Humans have that same magnetic mineral in minute amounts in every cell of our brains and in greater amounts in our sinuses or third eye. So there is a mechanism for humans to have this electromagnetic sense as well. Where was I going with that? Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so I was asking, can or does a vortex aid in spiritual or physical healing?
Right. Thank you. So that was definitely a two-parter, right? So there, the emphatic yes for we are electromagnetic beings. So physical healing, yes. The opposite is also true, though. Anything that can heal can kill, and we need to be sensitive not to spend too much time in a place that feels particularly turbulent or something like that. Then on to spiritual, there's no separation between the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Sure, we have concepts and words are limited, and etc., and they don't do justice to the essential unity of everything. But specifically with regards to spiritual healing, I would say yes. I think geomancy is not an answer in search of a question in that sense. The question is a very real one, and that is, do I experience an immediate and direct sense of connection and unity with my place? Or do I feel displaced? Do I feel disconnected from my place? Do I feel disoriented and lost? And what is the profound difference between those two things? So that as we reconnect with our place, it is a moving, it's a spiritualizing impulse towards experiencing that essential unity of everything. So for me, absolutely, my spiritual path. Thanks for asking.
No worries. So what is the vortex effect?
Who said that? You?
Yes.
Is that your question? Yeah. Well, the vortex effect is exactly what I was just describing there, which is every element, every vibrational frequency, every electromagnetic frequency, all the more subtle frequencies, the vibration itself, as I was saying, seismic and earthquake vibrations, the acoustics, which direction you're facing, how you're moving. These are all part of the vortex effect. It's everything that is a stimulus. In effect, anything that's a stimulus, light, sound, temperature, any kind of vibration. These all have the possibility of being deleterious and detrimental and stressors to the human physiology and brain. And if you are at a park, let's say you're at the edge of a park, and you're standing around talking to a friend, as I was this morning at my grandson's 3rd birthday, you have the option of facing the street or facing the park. And if you do face the street, you can readily measure that your physiology is more stressed when you face the street than when you face the park. So just purely visually, the sound environment's practically identical, but it does subtly shift depending on which way you turn. So now I'm segueing into the acoustic environment. I want to mention, the direction you're facing contributes to the vortex effect. So does the acoustic environment. Sound is coming from some direction, as we mentioned in our last interview. If it's a waterfall, the frequencies of that waterfall are very rich. They're coming into each ear a little bit differently. And when those slightly different frequencies mix, they can actually create a third frequency in your brain, a binaural beat frequency. And so as you change your direction in relationship to this waterfall or this sound source, the sound changes subtly from ear to ear. And I encourage people to try this. Excuse me for a second.
No worries.
I encourage people to try this experiment if you can just find a bridge over a little creek. You don't have to find a waterfall. Just a little creek or something. Don't even need a bridge. But stand facing this creek or waterfall or upstream if you're on a bridge. And listen carefully to the different sounds that are coming through each of your ears. And then slowly turn in a complete circle, let's say. And then notice how the sound changes as you do from ear to ear. And then you might want to turn back in a circle the other way for our purposes as Vortex researchers, just to complete the cycle. And what you'll find is that you have a very, very different experience of that sound source when you pay close attention to the subtleties of it, at least. You have a very different experience of it. It affects you differently depending on your orientation to it. So again, the vortex effect is it's everything in your environment plus you. That's the vortex effect.
So you think an individual introducing themselves into the environment creates or increases the vortex?
Sure. You're part of it. You're not separate. I'd say there's energy there before you got there, but you're coming in. It's going to change it. Sure. So there is an element of wherever you go, there you are. You do bring your own vortex energy with you, and bottom line truth for me to the question, can vortexes be man-made? Can vortexes be man-made? For me, the bottom line is the strongest vortex in the world is your own heart. In a very literal sense, your heart is a vortex. It's shaped as a vortex. The blood is vortexing through the heart. The blood has iron in it. Iron is a magnetic mineral, and it's the iron in your bloodstream and in your heart is being affected by the magnetic field in which it exists. But your heart, your own heart, is the strongest vortex in the world.
I like that. That's awesome. Another question I had, what are some phenomena that have been attributed to vortexes or vortices?
Yeah, here again, it's every kind of paranormal phenomena that I've seen, that I can imagine, seems to be associated with place. Now, in some instance, and the exception would be, a paranormal phenomena that's associated with an object or a person. Okay, but sometimes those spirits, those are like anchored, apparently spirits are sometimes anchored to a place, a graveyard, a hospital, a military ship, something like that. So there's an element of place to that apparition or that spirit, let's say. Yeah, but not every psychic and paranormal event is associated with a place. So, where's that overlap? That's our mystery that we're seeking to solve. But it seems like every different kind of psychic and paranormal phenomena has been associated with a place. Would you agree? I mean, am I missing something?
No, not at all. That makes total sense to me. I was just reading a comment here. from Y2 John in Periscope, and he said, I think ley lines, I think it was, I read about a kind of vortex that can absorb energy and play back.
Yeah, there's we haven't scratched the surface, Tessa. I can't believe it, really. I believe it, but yes, absolutely. That was super well put. I mean, you could almost reread that, or I'll rephrase it in this way. Place carries memory. Absolutely, 100% from my standpoint, place carries memory. So when we go to a place, unless we have great spiritual hygiene, we tend to leave a residue behind us, right? It's really great to pack up your energy when you go. Don't leave your residue there for the next person. Be responsible for your own energy, not just your trash, but your emotional energy too. And that's just true everywhere. That's true everywhere. And then these ley lines, these do seem to have a characteristic. I mean, they are running through the cities of empire, DC, London, New York, ley line, bam, or whatever it might be, Paris. I'm just making that up. But in real life, of course, true. These ley lines, each one has its unique, seemingly character. Peter Champoux, I say shampoo, he says shampoo. Champous is one of the great visionary mappers, and he maps all kinds of ley lines around the world, but especially in the U.S., all kinds of clusters, circles, ley lines. He calls them LEI, ley, like a necklace of flowers, instead of LEY, as in lays or ley lines. Yeah, so Peter Champoux points out many different kinds of ley lines around the world that are carrying these kinds of memories. The Trail of Tears ley line, for example, the Empire ley. So, absolutely, yes. Just as an object can carry memories, and people can do psychometry and read energy and off an object, the Earth the same way. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Y2 John. I know that you were on a show, I believe it was the History Channel, correct?
Hey, can I answer that question in one more second?
Yeah.
Can you hold that question for me? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to segue this previous question here. Does the ley lines carry emotion or memory? Absolutely, yes. I want to segue now to think about crop circles. What's going on with crop circles? Okay, some are fake. Forget those for a second. Forget them for a second. What about the real ones? What's going on with those? Where are those coming from? What have we got there? We've at least got some kind of geometry. If nothing else, if it's not aliens, if it's not the innate intelligence of the Earth, you can at least admit we have a circle or a pattern, some kind of geometry going on. Well, where is it? It's in crops. It's in our food supply. What is the imprint there, the energetic imprint that's being put into the food supply? And then that energy remains there for a period of time. That food that is impacted by those energetic imprints and those seeds, etc., might carry a very spiritualizing impulse. Okay, so to your next question, I had my 15 minutes of fame. I appeared, and your listeners might have seen me on Brad Meltzer's Decoded on the History Channel, and they had a show on the Devil's Triangle, Alaska. And I was happy to tell them that I thought that some of the disappearances in Alaska might be due to vortexes for reasons you've given me an opportunity to describe earlier in the show there. And I know your follow-up question too. I anticipate that it's about this device that I demonstrated on the show. On the show, I pulled out of my pocket
the golden vortex.
the golden vortex. But there's a backstory to this. Okay, so I carry a vortex in my pocket. It's a device made out of magnets. It's called the Golden Vortex. And I don't make it. It's made by Nick Nelson, the inventor. And as I understand it, inside this little plastic pendant, there are a number of magnets in a certain configuration. Well, I also understand that it does not even require magnets to create this kind of vortex effect. But on the show, I was able to demonstrate that this device apparently shrunk and grew these two co-hosts of the show as they changed places on a perfectly level surface. Man, we got good results. The visual result is that they look at each other face to face a couple of feet apart, they change places, bam, all of a sudden there you have a different height relationship. And, this works in a natural vortex, like the tourist attractions, of which there are 8 genuine electromagnetic vortexes open as tourist attractions in the U.S. And, of course, it happens everywhere where there's an electromagnetic vortex, but people are not in the habit of observing with such precision their relative eye level. The entire world seems to be just in this dynamic flux all the time, and until we look at it and put our constraints on it, it doesn't really it's the Schrodinger effect, that it's the cat's alive and dead until we look at something and it fixates at a certain speed or a certain position. Now, there's a real element of quantum physics there. So, if you check out danshaw.com or vortexmaps.com, you can click through to that YouTube video excerpt where I'm on Brad Meltzer's Decoded, and you can see the shrink and grow. On TV, hard to believe. You can go to any of these vortexes, the Montana Vortex, Oregon Vortex, Mystery Spots, California, here and there, Mystery Hill, North Carolina. And you can see for yourself, this is no kind of ordinary optical illusion that we can debunk. It is one visual effect of apparently this dynamic, turbulent electromagnetic field, this natural kind of shrink and grow. And apparently it's possible, evidently it's possible, I've demonstrated on national television, to duplicate that effect with a couple of magnets in a little pendant about the size of the quarter. So just defies kind of all logical explanation in Newtonian physics. We have to rely on quantum physics at the macro level. It's just, it's beggar's belief. I'm either a crazy person. I must be a crazy person. Nobody should believe me. They have got to see it for themselves. danshaw.com or vortexmaps.com for more information. But, go out on the landscape, do the experiments for yourself, see it for yourself.
Kevin in the chat room was just saying, is that a vortex in your pocket? and then he says he couldn't resist.
Did he was he listening to the last interview where he said, how many angels can I fit in my pocket?
Oh, that was gnomes.
Gnomes. That is like a psychic synchronicity right there, that he happened to say that about my pocket, although I did kind of lead up to it. I set him up. But, at our last interview, somebody made a joke about how many gnomes can I have in my pocket. And yes, I carry a vortex around with me. It seems to have healing effects. You don't want to overexpose yourself to any kind of vortex energy, I would say. But I do carry one with me because I want to show people this visual shrink and grow effect. Now, whether it's visual or actual shrink and grow, where nobody's quite sure. But I carry one around with me. If I have sore muscles, I put it on that. Magnets are known to increase circulation, oxygenation, everything. And this particular configuration seems to create a little portable vortex, probably interferes with other vortexes around, interacts with them. So that is a vortex in my pocket. And sometimes I've even inadvertently snapped a photograph and then later looked at the photograph, and the photograph was clearly a vortex photo, and the whole thing was smeared in this, not whole thing, but my legs were clearly visible. I'd snapped a photo of my feet accidentally, and then the rest big circular blur, and I'd apparently snapped a vortex photo. So people can see that and other vortex photos at my website, vortexmaps.com.
Kevin was also saying, hey, my buddy owns the Montana Vortex. And then,
Kevin, you're friend of a friend then, because the owner is Joe Hauser. And so say hi to Joe for me.
That's awesome. Synchronicities.
Well, Joe Hauser is he's a great friend of everybody, and Bigfoot. He's a Bigfoot researcher. And there's definitely association of Bigfoot with the Montana Vortex. Probably not least in part because Joe is there, but we've had sightings. I actually believe I heard Bigfoot call at the Montana Vortex. And so, there's an association there. Joe Hauser, Montana Vortex, they call it the south entrance to Glacier Park, Columbia Falls, Montana, world class. It is not just some crooked shacks showing some like stupid optical illusions. You've got to see it for yourself. Montana Vortex or any of the 8 genuine vortexes open as tourist attractions.
Yeah, and there's some that also have the same effect as the shrink and grow phenomena without having, the pocket vortex or whatever. Just switch sides and you're taller than the other person or shorter or whatever their...
I don't want to muddy the water. By saying that there's, I've got this portable vortex. It's true. But the natural vortex is the phenomena there at the Montana Vortex. And everywhere there's these natural phenomena. And what's happening there is that the energy is exceedingly dynamic and turbulent, as far as we can tell. And it's not even necessary to change places. I mean, typically what you see is 2 people are standing face to face. This is visible to the participants and to an observer. They change places and, from 360 degrees, you can see they've changed height. You can photograph it, measure the photos. It is no kind of normal optical illusion we can debunk. So that's happening there. There's all kinds of other phenomena going on, not just at these tourist attractions. Obviously, there's just a few of those, but it's going on everywhere, but just like hardly recognized.
Nikki had a question, and she was wondering, what does Dan think of magnetic blankets and items like that regarding how they affect vortexes surrounding a person? Would they stop a person from going through a vortex?
Ooh, like if you could have a vortex shield so that you wouldn't get sucked through a interdimensional portal. Mm-hmm. I think you might get burned if you were carrying anything magnetic or a metal through. I think the general lore is that you should not be wearing any metal when you enter in. And I think I don't want to make light of it. It's a brilliant question, as the questions have been great tonight. Your electromagnetic field is a very subtle, delicate thing. And it would be important to wear shoes with conductive soles or to walk barefoot in the wet sand or on the ground, to wear natural fibers. And leave your cell phone. Hopefully your device is someplace far away. Have intention about how you prepare to go into the vortex. Do so ceremonially, fast, or have some abstinence of some kind beforehand, or wear special clothing, and take full ceremonial steps, just as you would on any pilgrimage, to approach that vortex with reverence and respect, whether that vortex is a rock or a tree or any other conscious divine thing.
And when you're talking about the golden vortex, it reminded me a lot, and Sharon even brought this up, of the Tesla purple plates. I don't know if you've heard of those.
Oh yeah, I got one.
Oh, you do? That's awesome.
Oh
I
yeah,
have one too.
I've had it since '88, I think.
Oh wow.
Yeah, seriously, and they're one of your sponsors too, I think.
Yeah, Corrine, she's the one that sells them,
anyway.
And you can find them at purpleplates.com. But she's now got this new thing out, and the golden vortex, as soon as I saw it, it reminded me of that, because it's small and round and yellow, and to me it looks just like the golden vortex, and I haven't gone online to see if it is the same thing, but she's saying it works even better than the purple plate did as far as helping with different ailments and such. With my purple plate, it helped me with my motivation and my energy level, which is generally pretty low. But it makes me wonder about these new ones, and they're like $14.99. So I'm going to order one. I tried to order it at the wrong price, and so I got to retry to do that. But I'm interested to see if this is the same thing, and I don't know. Who sells the golden vortex?
I do.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, vortexmaps.com. Yeah, and the inventor, Nick Nelson, as well. And so, yeah, brilliant. Your listeners who are sensitive to energy, maybe they can feel magnet energy, or they can feel crystal energy, or maybe they feel some kind of earth energy. If people are sensitive to energy, they will very likely be sensitive to these purple plates and to whatever the new device is you're talking about. And if they are not sensitive to these kinds of subtle energies, then they can certainly learn, and they can practice with any kind of device like that, any energetic device, magnet, crystal, purple plate, or simply with tree or the earth, just by being sent, heightening your senses and walking on the earth and attending to all the subtle impulses that you sense.
Well, unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. Would you like to tell our listeners again how to find you and how to find your maps and such?
Oh, well, I've said a few times. You can find lots of information at vortexmaps.com. I will answer every email at ask@danshaw.com. I'll send you a free ebook called U.S. Vortexes 54 Miles Wide that you can download. And I'd love to hear from you. That's part of how I do my vortex research. And I love you.
Thanks so much for coming on my show again, and I can't wait to have you back in the future and discuss some more things that we didn't even get to touch on this evening.
Oh, there's lots of those. Thanks for all your brilliant questions. You and your listeners really appreciate the connection. Let's do it again.
No worries. Thanks so much again, Dan. And thank you to all of our listeners out there in We Are Paradox Media Land. Thanks so much for listening to my show, Late Night in the Rockies, and I look forward to talking to you guys this next weekend. Next Saturday, we have Dark Hunters Paranormal on, so I hope you guys can make it out to listen to that. Otherwise, feel free to come in and hang out with us at our after party, and you can look me up at Tessa Thomas-Peterson or call 970-335-9596. Thanks so much again for listening, you guys. You have a wonderful evening. Don't work too hard this week, and I hope to see you back here this weekend. Tomorrow night we have Sleepy Dave Davenport on We Are Paradox Media. Make sure you tune in and listen, as he's got an amazing show as well. Thank you guys so much again. Nighty night, love and light, and take care of my yous.